Hello and welcome to the Never Heard of It podcast. This is Craig Moorhead.
And I'm Shawn Harwell, and this is a podcast where we talk about the movies that we missed.
And on that note, that's where am I going with that?
You're going right to our special guest, aren't you?
And today we're talking with special guest and beer aficionado Todd Rohal, filmmaker, Austinite, Ohioite.
I think it's Ohioan is what they. I don't think it's Ohioite, Craig.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it sounds pretty good.
I like it. Yeah.
Todd, hello. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Craig. Hi, Shawn. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Todd.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Good. Thank you, Todd. You've been through a lot today to assemble the recording devices that are aiding us in this podcast right now. I don't want anyone to think it's not a hard thing to do to podcast. It's not easy. Don't just jump into it without thinking.
It requires a lot of equipment, and I'd like to thank Clay Lyford of Well Tailored Films for loaning me his recording equipment and his microphone.
Thank you very much, Clay.
Thanks, Clay.
So let's get started. So for this show, this is the first time we've had a guest on Never Heard of It. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to Todd a little while about making movies, and then we're going to talk about a movie called Reflections of Evil from 2002, a Damon Packard movie about all sorts of things.
Yes.
So anyway, so first, it's Todd time.
Hi. Hey, is this a segment of the show that's you do Todd time on every episode?
We do. So far, it's been cut out of each episode.
Yeah, we're waiting to get Todd Salons and what's the other Todd Fields?
Todd Bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Todd
Bridges.
Yeah. It's never easy. But this is the first Todd we've actually managed to get on the show.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much again.
Yeah.
So Todd, all three of us are friends. Todd, I met, in the early 2000s, I guess. And what I remember of this, I just want to start off with this, is a mutual friend had given us a DVD that had Todd's short film Knuckleface Jones on it. I think Knuckleface Jones is available out there on the net. Todd, is that true?
It is. It's on my Vimeo page.
All right. We're going to put a link to that out there so people listening can check it out. But me and a friend watched Knuckleface Jones every night for a solid week. Every night we would come home from work and like, we got to watch that movie again. We'd watch it every week. And then one day, having watched it 7 days in a row, Todd magically appeared at work. And we met him.
It's like The Ring, right?
It is. It's like The Ring, but a lot
really
less,
cool.
a lot less deadly, or remarkable, really, when you think about it.
It was less Japanese too.
There's almost no.
It was like the White Ring.
Can I interrupt for 1 second though, and just say, having gone to film school and having made short films, and having seen, no offense to anyone that we made short films with, but I can't think of many. Very, very few that I would want to watch 7 days in a row.
Yeah.
So that's saying, so if you've ever seen a short film, you probably know that this means something, right?
Right. I mean, and that was specifically our experience. We were not people who watch short films every night.
I haven't watched my own short films 7 times, period. I don't intend to ever. So that says something.
Yeah.
This was pre-internet as well, right? I mean,
yes.
Pre-television for you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, this was really at the beginning of everything.
It was the first thing you'd ever seen, the first moving picture. It was like you were a train pulling into the station. It was like you saw it and you were just amazed to see these moving images.
Then went from Knuckleface Jones and other short films, I imagine. I've seen some of your short films after knowing you as a feature filmmaker, and yes, they're fantastic. But you then made Guatemalan Handshake was your first feature, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and then you've since made The Cataclysm, and Nature Calls, starring Johnny Knoxville and Patton Oswalt. For anyone who's not familiar with these movies, since this is sort of the subject of our podcast here, these are definitely 3 movies that you should have heard of and should seek out. And so we will help you on the website and Facebook, and we'll help you find these movies, and you should see them immediately because they're all great. And you've been making some short films since then. I recently watched Rat Pack Rat, which I think is still on YouTube, and which I told Craig has some really amazingly typical YouTube comments if you haven't looked at them lately.
I never looked at the comments.
They are fantastic. It's a great short film starring Steve Little of Eastbound and Down fame and the late, great Eddie Rouse. And that's another one that you can very easily watch in, about 15 minutes if you're listening to this podcast. Go do that immediately. And then... So let's talk about, yes, I'm also kind of curious, like, what the road has sort of been these past couple years, because as Craig and I are talking about these movies and, even, like Two Faces of January, where we talked about a movie that had Viggo Mortensen and Kirsten Dunst and Oscar Isaac, and it's still so very, very hard to get your name and your movie out there when you've got even, like, those big Oscar caliber actor elements. What's it been like for you to promote your movies and sort of navigate the landscape of whatever the hell it looks like now in theaters? Because it's definitely changed probably from the start of when you made your shorts and Guatemalan to, now, or when you made Nature Calls even. Or do you even consider that when you're crafting a movie or when you're writing a script? What's your end game for what you want to do, and how has that changed maybe in the past 10, 15 years?
Well, everything I've made, I've thought, everybody's going to love this, from the writing stage through the shooting it, through finishing it. And then it's like usually at the first screening of it when I realize, oh, this isn't a movie for everybody. What did we do?
Really? Okay.
But I think that's it's best to go about it that way. I think to think, I'm doing this for everybody. I hope everyone loves this. There's not this feeling of like, I can't wait to isolate, some people and, or make some people feel left out. I think that's just a side effect of it. But I think all comedies like that, I think that's just kind of the risk, and it's just, you can't. I can't think any further on it other than I just got to keep doing what I think is right and funny and follow that. So even this last, I made a movie called Uncle Kent 2, which was a sequel to a movie no one ever saw. We just finished that, and that one I was very aware this is going to be very limited of whoever sees this because of the nature of what it is. But ultimately, I think the movie is very accessible. Anyone could watch it. Anyone can get it. It just doesn't have Michael Cera in it. It's just like it doesn't have that. So what can I do about that? Nothing. The movie still is funny to me, and we just kind of got to put it out there into the world and then hope that once this culture dies out that there will be people that dig back into it and discover these little nuggets that we made.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because I sort of have a similar feeling that some of this stuff is cyclical as far as the taste of just a studio machine in Hollywood, but then audience as well. But we'll get into that, I think, a little bit with Reflections of Evil. But I am also kind of curious, just sort of, it's interesting to hear you talk about like thinking every movie is going to be made for the widest possible audience. Is there a time, though, maybe just earlier in your youth, where you specifically fell in love with a movie that you knew was not for, say, that your parents would have hated, or that even was a hard sell for your friends? Or were you ever sort of conscious of the fact that you were into stuff that was decidedly not in the mainstream? Yeah,
that's sort of like the fate that I've been dealt. I think of like loving the stuff that I loved even as a kid. I'm kind of making those things now. I mean, if you made Pee-wee's Big Adventure now, it wouldn't be released on a bunch of screens. It would be like very small. It just like, I think that stuff, Raising Arizona, these kind of movies that I really loved are like the quiet movies that would probably fall by the wayside. That kind of humor nothing gets made like that anymore. It's so specific, and now humor's so much more broad and just about balls and penises and stuff because that's universal. Like everyone in China thinks that's funny too.
Yeah.
So
the stuff that I write. Yeah.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm kidding. No, it's true. I mean, you have to do that kind of. It's funny just that you mentioned Raising Arizona, which is also. I mean, I was thinking about that question earlier today, and Raising Arizona was definitely a movie that I've always loved and was one that I sort of fell in love with as a kid. And I mean, I know people now that love the Coen brothers that do not find that movie funny at all. And in fact, I read something recently where I think Joel Coen was like, we were mastering some of these for Blu-ray, and it's like, I don't know, Raising Arizona, that one was just like, ooh. And I was like, what? No, he's wrong. He's so wrong. It's great. It's hysterical. But No, that's interesting. I don't know, Craig, you got any other questions for Todd? Are you want to hop into the movie, or?
Yeah, no, I was wondering, like, is there a movie that's kind of a touchstone for you in terms of like when you really started thinking, man, I want to make movies? Like, is there something that set you off?
Yeah, it's probably pretty lame though, whatever that movie is. I mean, it was very early on. I said I wanted to make movies when I was in kindergarten. I remember saying that explicitly to a kid in this little playhouse thing, and I remember saying it. But I don't remember what I was watching then. I don't have any memories earlier than that. Like, it blanks out for another, like, 5 years until I have another memory.
Man, so the drinking started early.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just, like, falling down. I fell down a bunch of stairs.
Do you remember what that kid's response was when you said that?
I think he tried to kiss me. I think he tried to make out
probably,
with me. Yeah. It was kindergarten, yeah.
That still happens now, right? When you tell people you want to make movies, right? They just kiss you.
It's interestingly enough, it's lost its, that was pre like the Sundance hype, the indie scene. It was like no one was really, and then that came and went, and now it's just you tell somebody you're making movies, it's like saying that that is
you got SARS,
right? SARS, and I'm a garbage.
They go out of their way not to kiss you, right?
Yeah. But
what about you? Actually, that's a great question, Craig. What about, for you as well? What is there a movie that sort of kicked off a sort of filmmaker germ?
It's interesting you should ask me that, Shawn, because there is a movie.
I think so too. Yeah,
because you just asked someone.
No,
that.
For me, it was always Poltergeist. I saw Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
My dad took me to see it, and he disavows that ever happened. But I know I sat in a theater with my dad, and we watched Poltergeist, and I was 7 years old, I guess. And so I was completely terrified, just utterly terrified. And I remember specifically with the bit where the clown attacks the kid. Like, I was mortally just petrified. Everyone in the theater around me is laughing.
Including your father, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. I remember my dad leaning over a lot and saying, are you okay? And I was like, I guess so. Like, I didn't want to leave. I'd never asked him to leave, but everyone was laughing when this kid is like about to be strangled to death by a clown. And I was like, what? What is funny about this? I was really weirded out by everything about it, but I became really obsessed with gross stuff and scary stuff and movies in general. So that was me. Cool. What about you, Shawn?
I don't know. I think for me, it was probably much later, maybe even in high school, watching something like, I remember our English teacher showing us Apocalypse Now because we read Hearts of Darkness, and going, holy crap, like, what is this? And why are we watching it on like a 13-inch TV in the corner of a classroom?
As it was intended.
As Coppola had in mind, yes. And so, that was definitely one that stuck with me, aside from, all the early, Raising Arizona and all the comedies and crap that you would pick up at the VHS store. Yeah. But as far as thinking about, like, somebody actually had to write this and direct this, that didn't happen until, pretty late high school. I have another question for Todd, just because so much has changed with the internet, and you would think that, okay, well, now it's 1,000 times easier to hear about movies like Reflections of Evil. And Craig and I will talk about, I had never heard of this movie, but is there a good resource for you to hear about the kind of stuff? I know you're obviously kind of clicked into this community, and you probably have a lot of other filmmaker friends, and you've done the festival circuit and stuff, but I don't know, how do you hear about movies, or do you seek them out? That these kind of things that are definitely existing outside of the cinema plex at the mall.
Yeah, I feel that's a good. I would like to hear what you guys do too, because it feels like it's not any easier to hear about stuff. It's just as few and far between as it always was, and because the stuff that gets a lot of talk tends to be not for me, like lame, like the Birdemic kind of movies and stuff like that are just like that. I don't quite get it. But there's things that will just kind of pop up through a friend, through some other route that you're just like that's the only way, because they're so specific or they're so different, and part of the thrill is that it's not on not everybody's talking about it. So that is part of it, and that's very, I guess, part of the hipster culture now, as we can all say that no one's heard of this, but there is a fun element of like still finding that. I've heard about so many things that I love through VHS tapes being passed around and things like that, and that really was what made that stuff. Otherwise, it would just be this, it's like a YouTube kind of thing that comes and goes. but those things really, felt really close to you. So there was something about that where it felt like you had a secret, and that was exciting. Not that you were cool. It was just that you felt connected to other people through this smaller joke.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I remember like finding Film Threat magazine at the bookstore in the mall or whatever, and even just seeing like what Reservoir Dogs, like what is this, stuff like that. I mean, I'm kind of with you. It's hard for those sort of things, I think, to kind of cut through the chatter a little bit now. I mean, you would imagine that social media would be really good for accelerating this or pushing it, but in a way, I'm not sure that it is. I still think you're right. I mean, right now it feels like word of mouth, is probably the most successful way. But I don't know. I mean, I really would love, I think letterboxd.com is a cool site and it's an interesting sort of social media for movies concept. I don't know that anybody's nailed that in a way yet that is still, I mean, that's still kind of dominated by whatever the big movie is in the theater that weekend, I mean, so I don't know. I'm hoping that, that there will be a sort of avenue that will spring up somewhere, and it seems like it has to happen online, whether it's a streaming service or something else. I don't know. But if anybody's listening and knows of something that's good for that, please, God, let us know. Because Craig and I are going to run out of movie ideas or podcast episodes in like 2 weeks.
Well, and that's the thing, though. I mean, Todd is probably my greatest resource for finding things that I haven't heard of. And mainly because I think we share a similar sensibility in the kind of out there stuff that we like. Because, I mean, there's, I don't know, there's sort of a certain amount of nonsense that I like in the stuff, but beyond that, I just feel like I'm wasting my time. And so, whenever I hear something from Todd, it's like the right amount of nonsense.
Thanks, Craig.
Which maybe brings us to the movie, Reflections of Evil. So, Todd, if you could kind of let us know about Reflections of Evil, give us a little bit of background.
In one sentence.
Of 5 words.
Sure. So
good luck.
Yeah, when we were talking about a movie for this podcast, this was the first thing I thought about, and I think the only thing I ran past you guys. This is a movie called Reflections of Evil, made in 2002, or released in 2002. It is made by a fellow named Damon Packard, who is a boy genius. I don't know a lot about him. The story how I came about this movie was in, I think, 2003, 2004, a friend in North Carolina worked for a film festival down there, and he had this sent to him as a submission for the festival, and he sent it to me and said, you should watch this. It's incredible, and I did immediately, and I was just completely flabbergasted. I mean, like, and we'll get into all the hows and whys of that. So it's always been a movie I've thought about. It's been a movie I've been inspired by for now. I don't know how many, I can't do the math on how many years that is, or I don't know when this podcast is being released. But so it's been a good chunk of time that I've been familiar with this movie. So yes, I am so curious.
Quick question.
Yes.
Did it get into the film festival?
It did not.
Okay.
I don't think it played down there. I don't think it. I don't know what it's played in. I think that it played in New York 3 or 4 years ago. So it would still be. I feel like it's this movie that's just like ahead of its time and behind its time and like lives in its own time. It's so. It's a movie just made to be discovered. But slowly for decades, so like much to the, I'm sure, disappointment of the filmmakers. But this is how these are the movies I kind of live for. I'm curious what you guys think. Don't hold back.
Well, I can tell you that I didn't look up anything other than we were trying to figure out where you can watch this, and we'll try to get a link up on the site for sure, and I think it's on YouTube. But just based off the title, I immediately thought of something like Faces of Death. And so I was like, oh, holy crap, like Todd is he's gonna like really put us through the ringer here and watch this thing that probably shouldn't even be released in any capacity. And so I definitely was relieved to find that was not the case. I don't think anyone explicitly gets murdered in this movie. Well, maybe. I can't remember.
It's tough to tell if they're being murdered.
Tough to tell. There's a lot of blood, yes, and a lot of Franken beans, but Yeah, I definitely, my sort of thought was I have a sort of limited appreciation of like absurdist humor. Even I'm still not positive that I get like Tim and Eric, and some of the like Aqua Teen Hunger Force and like some of these things that I know are extremely popular. And by that token, yeah, this definitely seems ahead of the curve on some of that stuff. But man almighty, there's just some stuff that I love, and most of that was the stuff that kind of bordered on being frightening and just weird and dark. And, there's like weird, looks like video toaster face projections upon another face, and these like slow-mo, twisted screams and all these sort of anguished moments. And that's the kind of stuff that I was like, oh, there's like slices of this that are out of some weird David Lynch throwaway project or something, but then it's all mixed together with all this other stuff that at times felt like something like UHF or Kentucky Fried Movie, even with channel surfing. And there's a lot of like cuts of fake trailers or old TV commercials and things like that. And so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to even sort of say, oh, I like this, I didn't like it. I experienced it, and I think that's the whole point of it, right?
Yeah, it's like going through a massive anxiety attack. I mean, it's like living through, and it really did. This movie stopped me from moving to LA multiple times. Like it really put this feeling in me of like, it was familiar enough. I lived in Baltimore, I lived in DC, and in New York, and it was just sort of like, this was enough to kind of say, like, oh man, LA's even worse. I mean, it was just like, it's close enough to like, I mean, reality of just understanding, but it is literally like it's somebody going through massive panic, anxiety attacks, but illustrated in a way that like I mean, like I feel like psychological institutions could use this to teach people about like this is what it feels like or something. I don't know, like it's just such a level of some extreme psychosis, but it's so done so viscerally and in such creative, amazing, beautiful ways.
One of the things I kept thinking about throughout it, which, no, actually it hit me really halfway through, and I think mainly it was because of a lot of the news footage that started popping up and the front pages and all that, all the newspapers and everything, where I was like, oh yeah, this is 2002, so this is a short time after 9/11. So that's when I started sort of to get like the angriness, the anxiety of it and all that stuff, and it's completely... The entire movie feels like it's built to be completely disarming. So if there's anything that is, I feel like every time it starts to feel like, oh, this is pretty funny stuff, then, I mean, it will become something that is completely the opposite of funny, and just it'll be very dark or very gross, or it'll just jump you into a different thing completely, different film stocks and video throughout the entire thing. Like every piece, it felt like a quilt. It was kind of a quilt, like an anxiety quilt. But that was the thing. That's what I think became more and more fascinating to me as it went on. Was sometimes it felt like, hey, let's go make a movie as a goof, and then you'd watch it another 5 minutes, you realize this can't be a goof. Like, you can't make something this sort of epic as a goof. Like, you couldn't just be like, oh, let's just go shoot another 30 seconds right now. Like, it's
so specific.
I don't know. Yeah. That's the thing. It's so many things going on at the same time, and I think that fits in exactly with what you're saying about it feeling like it's like an anxiety attack.
And I'm glad that you sort of mentioned the LA factor of it. I do think sort of the predominant motif in this movie is this guy, Bob, who I think is Damon Packard, right?
Oh, okay.
Sort of main guy.
Yes, yeah.
I had to leave before the credits.
Right. I mean, that's what it's credited as. I'm assuming that's him. Yeah, so, I mean, he's walking around mostly in this movie through the streets of LA. There's a lot of Hollywood in there. And he's wearing like multiple headphones around his neck, and he's got about 17 different shirts on. He's a large man. I couldn't tell if maybe he was wearing a fat suit or some sort of pillow underneath his shirt, perhaps. It definitely looked like it was longer than his torso had any right to be. But I mean, if you went through this movie and just did a drinking game of how many times there's like a fight breaking out between two dudes in the background, or someone just yells off screen, "I'm gonna kill you," you would be drunk probably half an hour into the movie. And it continues, and then it will stop for 15 minutes and do something else entirely, like the amazing 1970s young Spielberg directing something on a weird, with the mannequins, that just goes on for like 20 minutes and is kind of crazy and insane and genius. And then you come right out of that, and Bob's walking around the street, and dogs are barking, and somebody's, "I'm gonna kill you," and it's, "I'll kill you." And yeah, I had that feeling too of like, I've lived in LA. I've spent a lot of time out there. There are obviously great parts to it, but there's something about like that sort of walking down the street in Hollywood, maybe not so much now, but early 2000s, that it just feels like there's just a palpable sense of aggression coming at you from every corner.
Yeah, the movie starts with this fake Tony Curtis. I should say too, there's probably multiple versions of this movie. The version I watched is from my original DVD, which was like about 140 minutes, and then there's a version on Fandor that's 116 minutes. I don't know. You guys watched a Vimeo link too, which I think was closer to what I saw on the DVD.
Yeah, ours was like 115 minutes.
Oh, really?
That sounds about right. I mean, it was right at 2 hours, I think.
Oh, wow. I think I got an extra half hour going in, so we can see where we. But it starts with this.
Well, you cover that part.
It starts with this Tony Curtis intro, and then he said he's talking about a different movie, and they dub in, like this. This is a movie made by Damon Packard, and it's dubbed in. Yeah. Perfect, demonic Tony Curtis voice. But he says in it, he's talking about a different director, and he says this director, for him, style was more important than story, and I'm just like, that's a great intro to this movie going into it. And for anything that's like going to get me into it, I'm just like, I've heard too many lectures about like what I love about movies is story, and it's like, no, that's like one part, and like, so if you're going to start a movie out with a fake Tony Curtis introduction and have him say that, it's kind of like you got me. But and the other thing that really locked me in is there's a scene he's kind of stumbling around outside this guy's house, and this couple, and they keep watching him, and he falls down and vomits. Like, this is like the history of vomit scenes in movies. This is one of the best, where he just vomits like gallons of pork and beans, and it's shot perfectly. Like,
it is, because you don't see his mouth, you just see it. You see it from the back of his head, kind of. So it's not. I thought of Team America, which kind of has a vomit gag that's with puppets, obviously. But it works totally differently here, Yeah.
There's one other movie that ever made me feel like I was actually going to puke, like it was going to make me puke. Have you ever guys seen Peter Jackson's Bad Taste?
Yes.
I still have not, no.
Well, because there's a scene where they haul this guy in, they have a huge bowl, they haul this guy in and hold him over the bowl, and he just like pukes into the bowl. And it's not even that gross until like about 2 or 3 minutes into it, and he's just like puking into the bowl. And this was, I have to say, this was another vomit scene where at some point I was like, oh God, okay, when is that going to stop? I don't know if I'm able to handle this right now. Well, there was a lot of vomit throughout the movie.
Yeah, I love that. I did see on IMDb the one bit of trivia for this movie. It says that I guess there's a quote on YouTube that was apparently from Damon Packard himself, where he said that he did not want to shoot this vomit scene. He said, the studio made me shoot that. They felt a mega vomit sequence would make it more marketable, especially for the vomit crowd. I didn't want that in, and did it under protest, which is hysterical, right?
Which we are about 5 years away from that being so real. I mean,
yeah.
Oh, the studio notes on this movie. Any notes, like making this...
Let's talk about that for a second, because there's a lot of like studio Hollywood in the background of this movie, and somewhat in the foreground a little bit. I mean, I just love that there's no sense of trying to hide the fact that there's miscongeniality posters in the background and billboards, and obviously like Coke and all these like products that I'm sure they obviously did not have permission to use. But then he at one point goes in and watches a movie in a theater, and they record like that THX intro, And what else? Oh, the Lord of the Rings trailer.
And the Star Wars trailer.
And he's watching Star Wars Episode 3 trailer. And there's bits and pieces of, God, what else? I mean, I feel like there was some of E.T. in there, right? At least the music was used.
Oh, yeah. And
well, there's a lot of E.T., yeah.
Yeah, well, the ride, yeah, the Universal Studio, which that for sure. I mean, you guys know about the movie Escape from Tomorrow? Have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the movie where they went and shot at Disneyland without permission. Well, this was 10 years ahead of that. Yeah. And yeah, they're all in Universal Studios. Clearly, I'm sure they did not have permission to go on the ET ride with the camera. And make
I love that. That's the other thing too, is like, it drives me crazy that he most likely, I'm assuming, couldn't make money off of this just with the things that he used, because yeah, it's so like, all that stuff is so effectively used, and it's so funny, at least to me. I mean, to go in and watch that intro movie in the ET ride with the dubbed Spielberg voice, and how they're gonna save Pookie with the
Pookie's Funland. Is that what he's going into?
Oh my God!
And, I don't know. I remember that ride. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's just, you just don't see that in any movie. I mean, in anything, you know, and there's some of that kind of candid camera vibe throughout this. I don't, maybe Todd, you know better than I do, but I mean, it definitely feels like, there are people that are, basically glorified extras that have, like, some of those people that like look like they're fighting, I don't think were real fights, but then other times I'm like, well, maybe, I don't know.
Like, I feel like he definitely walked up to a few people who did not look like they were in the movie.
But there's always this feeling in the movie, like, maybe they're not shooting a movie anymore, and this is real. And there's that fear. And, like, when was the last time you went into a real movie and had actual fear for, like anything is possible, anything can happen? And, like, with a movie like this, like, that, I'm sure they're making it thinking, we are not going to make a fucking cent on this movie, so let's just, we can do whatever we want. We can go on the ET ride, we can do that. Like, that would be the greatest thing to hear from a producer, on like, to completely free everybody's mind. Like, and of course, that doesn't happen once you're working with more than 5 people on something, but, like, it's like that is what would free everything and allows for that feeling. So that's why I think this is an important movie like that, because they don't have, no one's sitting there and worrying about that stuff. So you get this general or genuine fear that, like, man, this is scary. Like, are those people part of it? Are they not? That's great.
I was just going to say they clearly overdubbed some of those people, like,
so good.
Which is, it works so well. And that's, that's another thing too. It's like, you just go get these people. Well, I don't know. Maybe you still need, like, release forms. They probably didn't have them here, but
I feel like the reason I like it so much is it kind of returns me to that place where I was when I was a kid. Like, when I watched Poltergeist and I only had 7 years of movie watching under my belt, anything could happen in a movie. Like, I had no idea. I didn't know what the constraints were. I didn't know there was a certain amount of money that could go into it. You know what I mean? Like, anything could happen in any movie up to the time you're 7 years old, And so then to watch this and know, like, there are no rules here. Like, they don't have to satisfy any lawyers, and they don't have to worry about a budget, and they don't have to worry about marketing. They can fucking do anything they want.
And that's what should be awarded at, like, film festival. I mean, that to me is just like, if you go in and make a movie like that, like, you are the champion of the world, because there are no arts organizations who will pay you to make a movie and give you money to do this anymore. So it's like, when the discussion is like, how much did you sell that for? What was the box office on that? I feel like we've all failed. People at film festivals talking about that stuff. It's like, if this guy shows up to show Reflections of Evil to an audience, and it's like, I don't care, here's my gift to everybody, watch this movie. Like, I'm not going to sell it. It's just free. There you go. We just went batshit crazy with it. That is, like, they should be putting his face on, like, the Sundance dollar bill. I don't know what that means.
That's okay.
It's got Robert Redford's face on it, whatever it means. No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think what's maybe most disappointing about that is it seems like all the tools are absolutely in place for that to exist. You've got the internet. You can make a movie with your phone. Like, I do think you're right, though. It's just that part of, well, now there's so many movies. How am I really going to cut through, the noise and stand out? Well, I've got to have a bigger budget. I got to have better production value. I got to have all this and that and that and that, instead of really saying, no, I got to have something that's completely original, like entirely never been done before. Mm-hmm. And you just don't see that a lot. Specifically, I don't, and specifically in America, I guess. I mean, it's probably happening somewhat overseas, but yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I don't know why that's not happening more. I would expect, this movie would make more sense to me almost like as a 2015 movie than a 2002 movie in a weird way, because of, they could have just grabbed their phone and made this movie. And by the way, it kind of looks like it maybe was shot on 16 millimeter. Am I crazy?
It seemed like it was all mixed. It seemed like there was a lot of mixing there. Because, I mean, some of it definitely looked like video. Some of it was definitely film.
Some of it.
Yeah.
It didn't have that sort of digital crispness that looks like 2000, 10 forward digital video. Like there was something about it that felt dated and fun, and certainly germane to what he was doing with the content of the film. As crazy as that was, and obviously there's sequences which take place in the 70s, and then there's that whole, like, you talk about like this movie taking turns. There's a freaking music video from like 1960s with Bob's sister doing drugs and like this whole like polyphonic spree family or something. I mean, it was just like I'm like, I can't believe. I tuned out from some of this, but it definitely was like, he's really committing to this. This is really going to go on for another till the end of the song, right? And you have to tip your hat at that stuff.
And you get to the end. I mean, everything. Yeah, you've had this sort of, vein of the movie industry going through the entire thing, and you get to the end, and it's sort of building up to a big climax, and you realize, and he's at the Universal Studios, running through there, going nuts. Then his sister has to find him, I guess. So his sister who is dead. So it's the afterlife, and I'm going to go to a bigger point, but I need to mention right now the sequence where people are being thrown from rides and screaming, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" and falling on the ground. Oh my God, that was the best. That made me so happy. That, I mean, like, that whole, but this whole ending that seems to be building to your usual movie ending crescendo. You have to have a big ending. And then it ends with "to be continued." Just like that's, like, because I didn't know, I had no idea where it was going to go. So I'm already in the best position ever, and the fact that it didn't even end made me so happy. It made me really happy. Oh my God.
Todd, you don't know if there's any desire. I mean, you don't have any clue if there's a desire to do a sequel, or if that was just for the sheer joy of
just saying you're not going to get anything.
To ask this question. Yeah,
I'm assuming so. I mean, because he's made other movies since then, and there's I think this is his definitive. That's it, which is
Citizen Kane.
Which is so great. But yeah, it feels like it's like 10 movies in one. I mean, it's like it keeps skipping into different movies, and you're kind of, like you're saying, Kentucky Fried Movie. You mentioned that earlier, or just like channel changing as you're watching it, and like, that's a perfect way to end this movie. But it's like it goes into one. I think what is the quintessential moment of the movie too is like the Spielberg. There's a sequence when you're seeing a Steven Spielberg film. Which I originally thought was Night Gallery, but it's not. It's Something Evil.
It was a TV movie, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's supposed to be the beginning of his career, and like all these guys are questioning him and everything. But that whole sequence is like, you just, all of a sudden you're into this, like, what looks like you're on Spielberg's set and shot very realistically. I mean, it's this guy that looks just like Steven Spielberg, and this guy he's in this band called No Age is the band that he's in.
Okay.
That whole sequence to me is a whole other movie, but
definitely one of my favorites. And to the point where I wrote down, like, did they overdub this Spielberg's voice onto this thing from something? Like, it sounds so much like him to me. I don't know. Yeah. And if it felt like they just grabbed some behind the scenes DVD and took the audio from Spielberg's mouth. But that whole sequence too was also, it was cast so well with those guys that are working on. I mean, all those guys were just terrific. The guy climbing the ladder. Is that, I'm assuming that, okay, let's say that's one of your favorite moments, Todd. Craig, do you have a favorite moment from this that we haven't talked about?
No, not that we haven't talked about. It's really the people flying off the rides, like that whole bit and what was happening there.
Yeah.
I had a lot of great laughs and just some I was stunned many times during this and almost vomited once. But the part where people were flying off the rides, I will never forget.
I got two. I think my favorite joke of the movie was I think he was a police officer who, or ex-police officer. He's not in uniform, but he's talking to Bobby about, whether he wants to go to jail or give him this watch this like stolen watch that he's been hawking. And he goes on and on and on about what will happen to him in jail, specifically from black men. Yeah. And he's talking and talking and talking, and then it just cut. They do a cut, and it was super. It says 2 hours later, and he's still going. It's the simplest joke, but it worked so well for me. And then I also just this felt perfectly appropriate. But there's a lot of dogs in this movie. Like he's always like seeing dogs when he's walking around through the streets. They're on leashes barking at him. He barks back at him. Well, one of my dogs, when I was watching this, came in and totally like did the scoot his butt on the carpet thing right in front of me when I was watching this movie. I was like, that's kind of fitting. Like I can't get mad at him for that. So also, Todd, like I am kind of curious, like, is there anything that you specifically feel like you've kind of taken from this movie? And I mean, even if it's just, you've talked about sort of like what's inspiring about this, I think from a philosophical level of filmmaking, but is there anything specific, like even technique or just some sort of joke or anything like that you feel like you've been inspired by that you've used in another movie of yours?
Yeah. I mean, I wish there were things in this I could use. I wish I was making the kind of movies that like this that I could borrow more for, but I don't know, it's like,
go make
it's
them,
the kind of thing that like, where do you, put these things are so specific to this movie, but I mean, even like the music, using like the Carpenter's music during that and anxiety, like one of the biggest attack scenes where he's just walking down the street and people are coming after him, and he's playing, this Carpenter song that's We've Only Just Begun, and it's just like these amazing freak out, and it's like such a great combo of that, of such a good use of that song. I wish, to make anything that's like that, bringing things that crazy together. For this movie we just did called Uncle Kent 2, which less people, that have seen Reflections of Evil will see Uncle Kent 2. But it's there's like,
not now.
I was really inspired by, like, he has these scenes where people fall down and hit their head and just have these splatter packs behind them and their heads explode and stuff. And so, there was like a scene, we had this love, it was written by my friend Kent, and he had this kind of love montage. And I wrote in a sequence where we could try something like that, where a guy he's riding a bike and he smashes his head on the sidewalk, and they're in the middle of their date, So that's Reflections of Evil, and some head spherizing stuff, which totally freaks me out. I mean, like in this movie, we didn't do it in the same way, to the same effect, to have something that anxiety inducing, but like the way everyone's faces in this, just very simple, like early Final Cut Pro effect wise and stuff that everyone's used, but like to just kind of show people freaking out and distort their faces.
It's like it's like the bulge setting in a photo booth, if you have a Mac. Yeah.
Well, and that's another good point, because that's something that for me has always had to be a part of, and it's maybe because of that the Poltergeist story, everyone laughing at the clown attacking the boy and he's going to die. For some reason, for something to be really scary to me, it has to have some perverted twist where it's also sort of humorous. Like there's a Facts of Life episode that was a Halloween episode where all the characters on Facts of Life are being murdered, and like murdered in these weird ways. And for some reason, it freaked me out, and it still kind of does just thinking about it. And it's the worst, dumbest sitcom humor, but it's like everyone's really dying, and then at some point somebody opens a door and a guy in a pig mask comes through with a chainsaw. And I just remember thinking, like, it's kind of goofy, but it's not right. And like, it creates a very specific feeling in me that I really like for some reason.
There's one great sequence when he walks by a pile of trash and there's just like a dead body.
Well, there's just like a bloody face, right?
Yeah. And that,
I don't even remember
the most disturbing thing in the movie. And that is just like bust out, laugh out loud. Like, you're at that point where it's like you've seen all these horrible things, and then like, see, like that is a weird way to get a laugh, like, and it works.
Have you seen this movie with a crowd, Todd?
No, I know they showed it at Lincoln Center once. There was a movie called Frownland that Ronnie Bronstein made that got a lot of attention, like in 2005 or so. No, 2007 or 8. And it was basically the New York version of this to me. And I know that Ronnie, who made it, did not had not seen Reflections of Evil or even heard of it. But like I felt like there were the East Coast, West Coast. Like there should be a Biggie Tupac kind of thing going on between these two guys. But
I think so, yeah.
I don't think this movie did not get the love that Frownland did from all these like critics and high-minded people and stuff. Frownland does not. I mean, it has a sense of humor, but it's not, I think, as explicit as this one is. And but yeah, I feel like there's some filmmakers doing a lot of stuff. The Safdie brothers, their new movie, Heaven Knows What, feels a lot like, like this kind of world, much grittier and New York wise. But like, to me, this is like real, like the insanity of Los Angeles is perfectly captured in this movie, more so than anything else I've ever seen.
I don't feel like I've ever seen another feature that kind of does what this movie does. I definitely see influence in, a lot of short comedy films, stuff that's being done on websites, for websites, that's popping up on YouTube, or even like little Adult Swim shorts or whatever. There's a lot of that style of humor, I think, and whether he's just above the ahead of the cusp a little bit, or whether people have seen this and been inspired by it, I don't know. But it's hard for me to say what would cause this movie from getting, wider attention other than the obvious. And I think it's maybe important to point out there's some scenes that didn't work for me at all, and they go on a long time. Like, there's that scene where he's at a restaurant with, I'm assuming, his mom. And the whole thing is the joke of he's not going to eat anything else. And he keeps eating everything else. And it goes on for 20 minutes probably, right? Well, not 20 minutes, but there's stuff in here that's built like that to test your patience, and it kind of works within the broader framework of what comes before it and what comes after it. But you got to get through that stuff. And like, I don't know if this other movie that you're talking about that was set in New York is similar, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to know why one of these would be favored versus the other from independent film critics, or even just the press. People
to have that on your poster, just being like an anxiety attack, like not what anyone wants to see.
Right.
No,
just got home from work and now I'm
true.
watching an anxiety attack. But it's like there is definitely an audience for this movie, but it's just it's so
they're all dead, or they haven't been born yet.
And yeah, that's very possible.
They're stuck on the ET
like,
ride.
There are people who will watch this and say, yeah, like I'm up for watching a movie that's not here just to please me or, act as a way for me to just feel better about myself.
I'd love to meet those people.
But that's
Craig.
the thing. But
they don't exist. I love that. That's very hopeful thinking, but I don't think they exist.
But that's the thing. The movie industry is built on the larger audience that wants to feel good about themselves and watch something that just takes them somewhere else, where everything ends up happily, or is everyone's very pretty, so I don't have to think about the ugly people at my work and that kind of stuff. But then, I don't know. It's I don't know if it's counter programming. I hope and pray that there's a way that we can like coalesce an audience like this, and everyone can sort of come together and be able to find stuff like this, because I think there are a lot of people who would be very excited about a movie like this who will never hear about it.
Well, from what I read too with this movie, Damon Packard had printed up, I had heard it was 100,000, but like actually I looked when I was reading a little bit back up on this before we were talking, I think it was like 60-some thousand or 20-some thousand DVD copies of this when DVD was just kind of new as well. So that was like 2002, like when people were really and he printed those up and just handed them out to people. And I heard somewhere that he left them at ATM terminals, just stacks of them, and he mailed them to every celebrity that he could. And he got these letter responses. I think he was kind of harassing. I don't think he was trying to, but I think some people interpreted it as harassment, and he would publish those letters on his website. And one champion that he did have was Sage Stallone, who I know you guys went to school with.
Yeah.
Right, he's in the beginning of this. Yeah.
And so is he in the movie?
He's at the very beginning of the cut we watched. He's like
one of the fake trailers. Yeah,
because he cut he cut little bits into like all the trailers too. God, the editing on this was nuts. But anyway, so
he was a champion. I think that helped him get it to some people, but it was not appreciated.
No, it's tough. Yeah, and that's something that I think about too. Is like being in the business, and from my standpoint, you don't walk into a room with an idea unless you have another movie that you can compare it to that's been successful, right? Whether it's artistically, critically, or commercially. And so this, it's like, yeah, what could he possibly say? Like, well, it's kind of like Kentucky Fried Movie. Well, no, not really. You know, and so it's tough. I mean, that's the sort of catch-22, I think, of movie marketing and setting up ideas and stuff like, is that they want something original, but yet it's got to have a security net of a pre-existing movie that's proven this concept and to a degree, you know. So Mr. Packard, if you were out there, if anyone knows how to get in touch with him, man, I think we should have him on, Craig. I think that would be really, really interesting. Yeah. I would love to hear from Damon.
You should ask him, to see a movie. Yeah, because I think he's a little bit of an encyclopedia of this stuff, of some incredible stuff. So I bet he could transport you guys to another world.
Craig, we've done this before where we've watched a movie and like try to see what other ideas this might inspire. Did this spark anything for you? You got a pitch that you want to deliver to the sultry ears of Todd Rohal and myself?
No.
Okay. All right. Later.
I didn't come up with an idea to pitch. I was hoping I was going to come up with one when you were talking, Shawn, to be honest. Because it's actually a movie that is filled with ideas. That's the thing. Like, this would be like a great writer's block movie too, I feel like.
Yeah, because I mean, I was thinking like there's so many different things. I was like, this could be, you could do you could literally cut a version of this very movie that's just about a homeless guy selling watches, right? And that's kind of interesting. Or you could do, which is, I'm still kind of excited about the idea of the amusement park movie. I aside from Vacation,
sure.
I don't think Adventureland didn't quite rattle me the way I was hoping it would. Escape from Tomorrow did not as well. I admire all of them, but you're talking about people falling off of rides. I mean,
no one's going to go for it.
It's a hard movie to make, I think, because of production value, right? It's hard. How do you shoot an amusement park? I mean, it's got to be a nightmare. But that we got to figure out an idea for an amusement park.
I liked how he did it in this. Todd. Just like a ride goes by, you cut to a guy flying through the air, cut to a guy hitting the ground, close up of a brains coming out. I mean, like that's
so good.
You don't got anything to pitch, Craig?
I don't. I know. I mean, you're right. I just. How
about a remake?
I can't believe
who would you cast in this as your remake?
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
So it's really caught on. All the executives love it.
Damon Packard's murdered.
But they just don't want to release this movie. They want to make a completely different one. So, I mean, it's going to... I don't know. Yeah, who would play Damon Packard right now?
I'm going to go against type. Yeah. Not necessarily against type, against gender.
Oh.
Melissa McCarthy.
Melissa McCarthy. That's interesting.
Boom. Bank.
That's an interesting one. So this is now a Paul Feig movie.
Yeah.
And it could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I still would get Damon Packard to direct it.
Yeah. It would seem amazing, rude not to.
Yeah.
It would. I mean,
Melissa McCarthy.
It would be tacky.
Damon Packard's Reflections of Evil 2.
Paul Feig's funniest movie about 9/11.
But I wanted to Evil Dead 2 it though. I wanted to be a continuation of the first movie, but also be the first movie, and then also be continued at the end.
Yep.
And like the ends of Bridesmaids, when instead of Wilson Phillips coming out and playing, the Carpenters come out and do a live show.
Yeah.
And the audience loves that stuff.
There's no better way to send people out than bring on a beloved half-dead duo.
Mm-hmm. Or a full-dead duo.
Are they both dead?
No, I don't know. I just said that would be interesting.
That would be extra interesting if they were both dead, yes.
Propped up two corpses.
Yeah.
Played a song. Any closing thoughts on Reflections of Evil or life or filmmaking?
This has just been a total pleasure to sit down with you guys in the same room like this and talk about one of my favorite movies. No, I just hope that more movies like this get made before I pass on, so that I don't feel so bad about the waste of time I've put into the the existence I've been given by God above.
Let's just sit here quietly for the last few minutes while the tape runs out and just look at each other. Todd, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Super fun.
I love you, Craig. I love you, Sean.
Love you, Todd.
All right.
I love your wives. I love your kids.
Oh, what? Okay, keep reaching for the stars.
Is that the sign out?
Yeah, kind of.
This is Craig and Sean. You guys keep reaching for the stars.
Let's talk about next time. I have one title for you, and I'm pretty much positive you've never heard of it.
Okay.
And I think I'm just going to hit you with one title this time.
Oh, wow. That's confidence right there.
The movie is Soldier Blue.
Soldier Blue.
Soldier Blue. 2 words.
Soldier Blue.
SOLDIER space BLUE.
I feel like that's like a futuristic Dolph Lundgren movie or something. But no, Craig, I have never heard of Soldier Blue. I'm excited to check it out. Where can I watch it?
You can watch it on Netflix.
Great. Okay.
That's right.
All right. Well, hit us up on Twitter. Look us up on websites and other places. And you know what to do. It's the internet. Come on. We don't have to explain this stuff.
Yeah, you can find us.
But yeah, we'll talk to you next time.